Hi, Sterling.
Hi.
Hello.
I think everyone, now we are 60 and all the panelists already with us. I would like to, I think it's time for us to start this webinar. First of all, thank you all participants for joining this webinar. I really appreciate your confirmations and then your participations now. Really thanks for this. I'm Saurlin Segian. I'm the International Land Coalition's Regional Coordinator for Asia. I will moderating this webinar for the next for this 1 hour. We want to make sure this will be 1 hour because I know we have a lot of already a webinar in many other works that we do. Yeah. I would like to introduce also the rule for us this webinar. This will be 60 minutes, and then overall presentation will be 20 minutes, meaning each panelist will have 5 minutes only, and followed by discussions. Yeah, discussion will be 40 minutes. So every participant can send your questions and feedbacks through chatting room. You see chatting room in the right side or in the bottom, and then we will also follow up with a live discussions with the participants. We will make a limit, but let's see the time. We make limit 5 to 3 persons of the live conversation between panelists and the participants. And while the presentation, please mute your mic so we can clearly hear the presentations. And I also want to inform you that this will be recorded and summarized, and after this webinar will be sent to you the link. Okay, the topic for us for our discussions today is the land rights advocacy work in Asia, and we know this pandemic will be long lasting, and it directly impacts the peoples, especially marginalized and land communities, and especially also the way we work with them, the community organizers, the land rights advocacy groups. Yeah? So from this webinar, we want to learn how we have good practice in the ground. This will be very important for us on how to see the good practices that already implemented by our friends dealing with COVID-19. And also we need to understand the availability of the food in Asia, yeah, because we understand this will not be soon over. It seems long lasting. And another important part that we need to learn from this will be, do we have a reliable data to deal with this COVID impacts? Yeah, and does it provided by government, or do you think it's enough for us? And the last part, I think we need to learn from this, what is the linkage between the land rights advocacy works with this COVID-19 impacts? That's what we want to learn. I would like to introduce the panelists. We have 4 panelists with us now. The first one is Dewi Kartika from Consortium for Agrarian Reform based in Jakarta. Maybe Dewi can just wave your hands. Dewi?
Hello, everyone.
Okay. And we have Jonathan Lassa, a senior lecturer at Charles Darwin University based in Australia. Can you just wave your hand and say something? Jonathan?
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. And we have also Irendra Rajawali, data specialist of ILC Asia. Raja, say something. Hi.
Hey, hopefully you're all healthy.
Welcome. Last but not least, we have Michael Taylor, Director of International Land Coalition based in Rome. Mike. Okay. Now, we are going to start talking with the panelists. I would like to go first with Dewi. Dewi, you have 5 minutes, but before you start your presentation, I want to give you one driving questions. Because during this pandemic, KPA has been connecting local communities and organizing food package distribution for rural to urban areas in Indonesia. We know that in the last 3 months. How does KPA connect and mobilize those people that have extra food resources in rural areas with those who are in need in rural and also urban areas? Dewi, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Saurlin. So I jump to directly now to presentations. Yeah, thank you to ILC Asia for inviting me to join with you to share our experience during COVID-19. So as we know that this pandemic of coronavirus has giving big impact on the economic crisis globally, regionally, and also in the country level. And the most vulnerable group or vulnerable community during the COVID-19, of course, in like, for example, in Indonesia, like workers, laborers, having big impact because slowly but sure, during the COVID-19, there are so many workers, labor being fired by their company. And of course, also urban poor become the very vulnerable group in this time of coronavirus. And then we can see in the rural area, maybe in the first time, rural area become the last one who felt that the coronavirus will impact them, because as we know that the pandemic is directly go for the first time to urban areas and then get slowly now making impact also in the rural areas. And from what we learned during the COVID-19 is if you see that the monoculture based rural, like many village or rural areas that has been transferred into monoculture plantations, is having also major crisis in economy and food crisis. So the food crisis not only impact urban areas and poor groups, but also making impact also in the village that already been transferred into monoculture plantations. They're having a food crisis. And some of member of KPA is also fisherfolk organizations. They're having also negative impact because there's so many fish product has been stopped by many company, by many restaurant, and also some of our member is also having fish product for export class. So now it's become shut down and stopped. So we need to figure out how to make the fisherfolk community can survive during the coronavirus. And then the last one, of course, the interesting one about rural resiliences. There's so many village, like for example, grassroots member in KPA memberships is also having resiliences. They're having enough food for themselves. They have food sovereignty. They have enough food also to share. So when we facing the first time, of course, there is a challenge to make sure that the rural understand that the COVID-19 not only impact in rural urban areas, but also slowly but sure the virus will going to the rural. So the first one that we KPA try to mobilize is about the informations and about the health guidance, about the rising awareness about the dangers of this pandemic, to make sure that they really full understand about the impact that will get to them slowly. And the first time we make a call to our peasants members about the importance of food sovereignty first. So in the level of family, in the level of community, in the level of village, we want to make sure that the members ready to make sure that there is enough food for them in their livelihood before making food mobilizations for others. So that's the first step that we do. And then somehow we found out on how to connect with many vulnerable groups, such as workers and fisheries. So we making some scheme. Food sovereignty first for peasants, family, for neighbors and community, and then food donations. It is almost 2 months we mobilize food donations from many peasants. So food donation is like vegetable, rice, spices, fruit come from rural, and then make donations to urban areas. So we mobilize those kind of donations to strengthen. This is also how we strengthen between rural and urban relations. So we mobilize food donations from peasants' family, from peasant unions to to worker unions, and also to poor urban community. And then the other scheme is also making economy solidarity, meaning we absorb. Yeah.
1 minute more. Thank you.
Okay. Economy solidarity means that we try to absorb and buy the harvesting products, because now in Indonesia during April to May is the harvesting time for peasants who harvest paddy, and we try to buy with normal price, because the pandemic is also making impact to the price also in the level of farmers. So we try to control the price, buy rice from the harvesting time, and then sell to the labor union. So we now have a economy solidarity agreement between KPA with peasants union, with workers unions. So worker union can buy with economy price, because we give incentive to the price. And then we did also food exchange. Food exchange, the interesting one, because we also have FISAFOC members. So we do also another scheme like food exchange between peasants and FISAFOC. So fish exchange with the with the rice, for example, or with the fish product. And the other one, the last one, of course, because we understand that the pandemic will also get into the rural area. So we mobilize also health supports and guidance for peasants, for indigenous peoples, to understand on how to treat, because there are so many people going back from urban to rural. There are so many discriminations to those people. So we also make sure that the peasants and indigenous have understanding on how to have a protocol, health protocoler, to welcome them, but also to make the visitors or their family who come back from the urban to have a quarantine, a self-quarantine, and also make like joint housing for families or neighbors who just come back from the urban areas. I think that's the initiative that we did, Shaolin, during the COVID-19 on how to strengthen between the peasants, workers, fisheries, and also indigenous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dewi. It's really interesting to see on how you build MOU between the peasant organizations with the worker organizations. Thank you for your inspiring works. And now, can we move to Jonathan Lassa? You have 5 minutes, and I would like to make a first questions to you, because we observe that you make a very good research on food in Asia. So it's good for us to understand the situation of the food. And so the question is, how do you assess the availability and access to food in Asia region? And do you have any insight or possibility of food crisis in the regions? And what do you think should be done to address that? Please, Jonathan.
Right. Thank you, Pak Saurin. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, so thank you for that very important questions for the moment. Number one, what's going on right now in food sector? How much we know? And what information we don't know so far? And how do we know what is going on in the sector? And how quickly governments provide updates on production? At the moment, if you look at all the data that is provided by governments, including the ones that they submitted to FAO and also some regional organizations, most of the data are based on prediction for 2020. So that is based on the number of area to be planted, and this will be updated and verified at the end of the year. So at the moment, we have no idea at macro level, including national level, including provincial level. Now, the only best prediction that you could make is based on the price. And the good news is food price index is updated on monthly basis, as we all know. But at this point of time, it's very hard to tell from the global price index, because it seems to be manageable. And if you look at the price averages from January to April, it's kind of going down, which is contrary to what we believe and contrary to some of you who might think that things are actually getting worse on the ground, which is in many places that is the case. Now at the global level or at the regional level, like in Asia, it's hard to tell. So I think we know that what we know so far, as Dewi outlined some of the problems already, we will have a few winners and losers. Probably many more losers than the winners, because the lockdowns have created disruption in the whole tourism sectors that the effect you can see in all the supply chain. So, but this is one of the problems that we are worried about, because we are worried about exporting commodities that countries have been exporting, and this will be the impact will go back to the farmers. So I think the best way to read the problems at the moment is we have to create our own food system frameworks at local and global stage, and answer the questions who are the losers. And probably we start from the nearby communities that we have been working with, because I think that will provide more kind of real pictures on and with human face, not just dry statistics that can be very confused at the moment. Now, the problem at with the task of assessing Asian food security, for instance, as we are talking today, is that there is no government mechanism, I mean intergovernment mechanism, to come up with the share data that can be updated on monthly basis or 3-month basis. The only mechanism in Asia that works so far is Asean. We have seen South Asia trying to do the same, but the mechanism is still a work in progress. So if you look at the Asean Food Information Center system websites, I just visited them like yesterday again. They provide what is called as early warning updates for food. But again, the data that is provided today is actually based on prediction, and it is as of end of March 2020. So what we know so far, the first is there is a decline of production overall in Southeast Asia in terms of rice, maize, and also sugarcane. And that is quite clear. For rice, for instance, the total losses is about 1 million hectares, 1.1 million hectares. And that is huge if you want to think about a small country that probably need the whole kind of food produced from that kind of size. And that also happens for maize. Maize is a little bit contrariable, but overall flood and droughts are responsible for the losses in Southeast Asia. And we know that Thailand is the worst hit last year. Thailand alone lost like 900 hectares of land to floods and failures because of the drought. So please remember that climate uncertainty is the game in town, even though we are just focusing on the urgency of COVID-19. Now that is the gloomy picture. The good news is ASEAN has been trying to cooperate in sharing data. I think Indonesia hasn't shared the data this year. I'm not sure why. Usually we are quite good. But the problem with ASEAN early warning systems is the updating is quite slow. This year is quite lucky because we got like 3-month basis kind of update. In the past few years, sometimes it's 6 months to 18 months update. So the data that is provided there is simply based on prediction. So we cannot have like this solid data on what is going on at macro level. Now, let me tell you, because I studied disasters and crisis management. And in crisis, you have to make decisions without waiting for perfect information, because that is a dream. In normal time, we have already asymmetric information problems that make policymakers difficult to come up with the right decisions. In crisis, it's double or even triple. Now, I think what you are asking me is trying to provide some kind of policy options for the group, including land-based rights groups. So I think Dewi have been providing a good overview, a balanced overview of what is going to happen in terms of the consumer or the poor urban workers, and also the farmers. So the first step that we could do probably is rescue farmers by implementing comprehensive emergency support measures at this point of time, because some of them might feel disincentivized to not growing because of failing to sell the product. Some commodities like rice in Thailand and Vietnam, we are quite lucky because the governments are quite ambitious in buying from the farmers so they can actually stock to trade. In Indonesia and probably India and also China that we have been researching since 2014, we know that these big countries have been trying to ensure support for the consumer by stockpiling for food security purposes. That is something that WTO is kind of questioning because of the fear that probably offer protection of farmers and buying from the fixed price might jeopardize the trade because you distort the market, and as a result the competition is not fair. Well, the problem is at this point of time, WTO cannot serve the people. It's the governments in the end that have to be accountable to the people, because at this point of time, governments need the stocks to be delivered and ensure that everybody can get access. Countries like Singapore that haven't actually produced anything, if they haven't actually implemented measures like solid stockpiling policy, I think there will be collapse. But if you look at the progress at the moment, their food price indices is the best in Southeast Asia. The least volatile price for most of the food price at the moment. Now, what I'm actually suggesting is probably one thing that some of the labor group probably disagree with. I'm not sure about the farmers group, but promoting universal basic income for poor communities, including the landless farmers or the labor farmers. Because at this point of time, I don't think there is any better solutions to speed up with, to come up with interventions that quite fast enough to ensure that households do not collapse in rural and also urban. Now, at a global level, I think FAO needs to take a leadership.
1 minute, please, Jonathan.
Okay, right. So I'm getting there. So at a global level, I think FAO needs to come up with a framework that allow us to understand about the progress of production in real time. And I think regional organizations like APEC needs to also come up with the same thing. Now, what land rights group can do is to engage in the global debate concerning the future of stocks and the future of WTO policy around stocks. I think you guys need to also engage, because we need to make sure that market needs to be accountable if they insist everybody to go on free market. The problem is in the times like this, market is not really working. So let me put the last one that most of you probably not being aware. Southeast Asia is the only country that is now implementing a kind of unified regional economic integration. The problem is at this time like this, everybody shut their door down. So it seems like regionalism do not work to some degree, and they don't even work in times of emergency. So the questions for the future is, how can these global promises on global mechanism, including regional mechanism, can actually work at this very time where we need them all? And I think that is the points that I want to make.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's very important to quote that you mentioned that there is no reliable data on the food availability in Asia. It's really a bit scary for us. So we don't know whether we have food or not in the coming months. Okay, it's again related to data. I would like to go to Irendra Rajawali. He is a data scientist. One of the keys to overcome this pandemic, I think we need to have a scientific data, either for decision makers and also for us as a peoples. So my questions to you, before we start your presentations, do you think government across this region have been using scientific data to mitigate this crisis? And can you elaborate a bit practical tools that can be used by land rights groups to understand the pandemics and its multiplier impacts, especially on the farmers and local communities in Asia? Irendra, you have 5 minutes, please.
Hey all, thank you very much, Sorlin. And Hel, regarding your question, I hope you can hear my voice. Yep. Okay. So just to answer your questions, I think yes, the government in these regions have been using data. Yes, they are using data. They're trying so hard to get the data, but there's still one, I think, underlying or basic problem with this data thing is, which is when we are dealing with a pandemic or outbreak, there's something called outbreak science, which is like outbreaking. You know, we are dealing not with only arithmetic or algebra data, which is number per day. We are dealing with networks data. So we need more than just numbers per day. We need networks. We need, you know, we need connections. That's my take on your questions, Saulin. So yes, they're using data, yes, but the problem is data is not yet information, and information is not yet knowledge. What we want is knowledge to be able to prevent the spread and to be able to take care of ourselves, especially indigenous peoples and local communities members in the grassroots area. So that's my take of your questions, my answer of your questions. That the data that has been built by the governments, in my opinion, are not really appropriate to answer the underlying problems, which is spread, which is networks. So they just put numbers, and you all can see this in your screen that in mid-February, we tried with a local some local organizations, including the Alliances for Indigenous People in Indonesia. We try to use technology. We try to use cheap technology. We try to use the open source technology. It's called Kobo Toolbox. We will give you the numbers, the networks. What do we need with this in these situations? We need data. We need to get data acquisitions. We need to analyze the data to be able to be in front of the virus, if you want, or in front of the problems, if you want. So in a way, well, not necessarily predict, but at least we have pictures of the possible futures, possible trajectories in terms of indigenous people and local community members, in terms of food. Then we might have some plan, some idea on, wow, this area X in the province Y, most probably in 1 month time in front, they will lack of staple foods, for example, things like that. So what we did is we went to a platform created by some activists, internet activists. It's called Kobo Toolbox. We'll give you later on. So we try to create a platform like a questionnaires, online questionnaires that we can also put in a handphone, in the smartphone, so it becomes apps. And we also create a robot in WhatsApp, so it's called WhatsApp robot, WhatsApp bot, in which people going to that number, they can have questions, and then they can answer it. And we ask about we asked about the availability of food. We asked about also the price of food. We asked about if they are doing lockdown or not in the whole area of Indonesia. We tried in Indonesia. I'm pretty sure there are some of our comrades in some other places on earth doing it as well. So we do it. So we created these questionnaires together, and we spread out into the public, into the people. So because we see the challenge is there's a very, very urgent need to ensure that food security for all people during the pandemic is there, right? But we need the data that comes from the ground. We need the data from the grassroots. How to do it? So we use these tools. So we need speed, we need accuracies, we need precision, we need to crowdsourcing, crowd as a source. We need to do it at the local level. We need the scale, how big we want to deal with. We are dealing with in Indonesia. I can give you the example. And we need the dynamics, so place and time, and we need the networks. And I think a simple tools like this, open source, can be programmed easily by anybody. We can, using this one, we can get what we want, that one. In the next slides, I will show you the results later on. But then the idea is to connect the dots, to crowdsource, so source as a crowd, and in my opinion as well, is to challenge the data of the governments. So I call it as, or we call it as a techno and data politics. the dangers now or after COVID-19, the dangers, in my opinion, in our opinion, is that the world will go into the directions that we probably all don't want to go, which is the surveillance, the big brothers. If you all know, you know all the 1984, the novel by George Orwell, Big Brothers. Now there are some big brothers using internet, using everything. So the world might go to that directions. In my opinion, it's a bit scary. So while we are doing this, we also challenge these ideas. That's my take. And the second slides, please. Yes, so this is more or less the results, my friends and friends. So you can see the map in the top left. That's the map of Indonesia. Until today, per day, there are around 2,000 inputs from the ground using their mobile phones. And by the way, you don't have to have networks. Like telecommunications networks to be able to use this one. You just have to install it first when you have networks, and you go to the field, and then you take the data. Tak, 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 tak. You don't have to have networks. When you have networks later on, then the data will be uploaded into the cloud. So you can see we have now more than 80,000 informations, dots. You can see this reddish and orangish dot, that one. So if you click those dots, you can see something more or less like in the top right corner on your screen. You can see the pictures. They can take they can take pictures. They can take they can answers. They can take the locations, etc. So there is a data taken by people. Right, so and then it's from grassroots and updated every now and then, time-wise and location-wise. And then in the top right, in the bottom right, you can see, well, I'm sorry it's too small, but I would like just to show you when the data is already acquired, when the data is already there, we can do some analysis. For example, the rows in the bottom right shows the provinces in Indonesia. And the columns shows the status of this area. Are they doing lockdown or not lockdown? And you can see there is a bluish area, which we call it as the hotspot of the lockdown. So in 3 or 4 provinces in Indonesia, there are villages that already locked down on their own, right? So this is what lockdown, and etc. 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 We have also the data of the rise of the price of the food yes. So we can also analyze this one, all the data, and we return back to the communities. So that's we work. So this is what I can share with you all, guys. So actually there are platforms, there are open source platforms and run by activists in the internet that you can use just to get the data from the ground. Definitely, my take is technology is just tools, and technology, behind any technology is human being, is networks, is social networks. There has to be ethics there. There has to be moral there. So in this sense also, actually, we can also challenge, this rather top-down data from the government. But in Indonesian case, for example, the government only discussed about food in the month of, if I'm not mistaken, only April, which is way too late. I mean, we started it in February, so we tried to, to read, to get information from the grassroots level. So that's what I can share at the moment. Definitely, time is limited, but I mean, we can share more in the next occasions and then for technicalities. Thank you very much, Saulin.
Thank you, Rendra. It's very important, very inspiring that you are proposing alternative open source tools, so-called Robo Toolbox, and you also mentioned important highlights on how to challenge the only government data. We need also alternative data. Okay, now we go to Michael Taylor. Last but not least, I also want to make driving questions. Yes, international land coalitions based in Rome. Rome, we know Italy is one of the most affected one. Yeah, COVID-19 has affected not only also Asia, but globally. And my question is, as one of the key actors in the land rights movement, what kind of new practices that can land rights groups like us to do to play our role, and what kind of current old practices that you think we should not do in this coming futures? 5 minutes for you, Mike, please.
Thank you, Saulin, and it's great to see so many people. Hello to all of you. Firstly, I would just like to congratulate the many organizations and members of ILC which are playing a very significant role in the immediate crisis that so many people are facing. We've heard what KPA is doing, which is very interesting. We've been reading, in fact, even in the press here in Europe, about the work of Ekta Parishad. In India, in the chat, I've been following ALID. Moni has been putting some very interesting information about ALID, VB, and I think many ILC members are showing how they can use the very good networks that they have on the ground in communities to be part of the relief effort, and that's fantastic. And I think that's an amazing job. It's a very important job. I think through this process, many will see the importance of civil society organizations which are really rooted in communities and how they can work alongside governments to do that important work. So congratulations to you. It's not actually what I'm going to talk about now, because I want to try and keep the focus on land rights. And you asked the interesting question, Saulin, what should we stop doing and what should we do? So I want to suggest two things that one thing that we should stop and two things that we should do more of, focusing on our collective vision of a world in which land rights are more secure. And I would say the first thing that the main thing that we need to stop is to think that we will be successful if we continue with business as usual. Many organizations are realizing this in many different sectors, so it's not unique to us in the land sector. But I think in the land sector, as we have spent probably the last 10 years working for land rights, talking about our work for land rights as land rights, justified by the fact that people need more secure land rights. I think we see now that will no longer be powerful enough to grab the attention of policymakers and to grab the attention of decision makers. The world is already reeling with the effects of climate change, and now on top we have the coronavirus, and we know that even as we hopefully emerge from the coronavirus itself, the economic fallout from this is going to be tremendous and will last a long time. So there are many organizations that do very good work which will die, which will no longer be able to get the funding they need to do the work they do. So I think we're facing a difficult future. And as we look as land rights organizations into the future, the first message is we cannot afford to think about doing our work as we've done it before, in a sort of business as usual mode. So we need to be thinking about how we present the work that we do on land rights as part of dealing with crises. How do we present the work we do on land rights as part of creating economic opportunity? How do we do the work how does our work on land rights contribute to resilient food systems that continue to operate through crises. These are all big questions that, unless we can answer clearly to our governments, to our donors, to the public that that supports us or doesn't support us, we will, unless we can do that, we will become irrelevant, really. And so this is now the first thing that we should be doing. There's no reason why we should continue with business as usual. There's no reason why a world focus on dealing with a crisis should make land rights irrelevant. All of us know, and as we follow the chat and as we listen to people, it's very, very clear that our organizations, in many cases, really are at the heart of dealing with the COVID pandemic. Not just now in emergency modes, but as we look ahead to rebuilding our economies, rebuilding our food systems, rebuilding the ways in which we look after and relate to our environment. We know that land rights is in the center of those. And so the first thing that we need to do better is to situate our work within those bigger challenges that the world is facing, that our governments are thinking about, the donors are thinking about, and that's preoccupying many organizations that work in our sector. So that's the first thing that I think we need to do better if we're going to survive as organizations, and if the world is going to take notice of us, is to show how our work on land rights really is at the core of building a post-COVID world which is fairer, which is more equitable, which is more resilient and more sustainable. And the second point that I would like to make is the fact that all of us are working really for system change, aren't we? We're working for a world which is different than the world we live in at the moment. We're engaging with great inequalities in our society. We're engaging with great injustices. We're engaging with processes that exclude and marginalize people and create the kind of economies and societies that we don't want to live in. So we're trying to change the system, and anybody will tell you who works in trying to change systems that times of disruption like this are also times of opportunity. They're times that we can bring about the kind of changes that we couldn't dream about before, that we've been working for years and years to bring change and we've been frustrated. Now is the time that those changes can come, because now is the time that people are questioning the status quo. They're questioning, are these food systems that we've built the right food systems? They're questioning, is the way that we've been looking after nature and the environment the right way? They're questioning whether the kind of economies that we've built that rely on cheap, disposable labor, are those the right kind of economies that we should be building? So there are many questions that we offer answers to, because we have been working on alternative ways of producing food, of income, of environmental management, all of them centered around a different kind of relationship between people and their environment. So let me just give you a few examples from our network. One is from a member called Afra in South Africa, that as the government came out with a disaster relief bill that was meant to serve farmers, Afra looked at the bill and realized that actually most family farmers, most subsistence household farmers, would not be eligible for the relief that the government was offering, because the bill was targeted at large-scale commercial farmers. And so through the National Engagement Strategy Platform, Landless South Africa mobilized, together with many, many other organizations, a petition to the government to say the very people that we should be helping right now in this moment of emergency are really the small-scale family farmers. And they were successful in rewriting those provisions so that the emergency relief bill went and recognized this, and supported and protected the ability of the smallest producers to carry on producing. We've seen many examples, and it was mentioned in the chat as well, of how indigenous peoples, particularly in the Amazon, in this time when the COVID threat is a very direct threat to themselves, are standing up and are protecting their territories in ways that they have not before. They're taking control of the land that they claim as their own, and they're stopping people coming in, including land grabbers, including timber loggers, including people that want to take land for plantations. And they're asserting extremely strongly their right to their ancestral land. So we see not just an opportunity to talk about different ways of development, but we also see it being shown and expressed and actually demonstrated by many of our members. And so I think the second point is really, let us not lose this opportunity. We take the role as a global network, ILC, to not lose this opportunity at the global level, to make sure that we take the collective voices of our members in global debates at the moment. For example, let's just choose one example, the Food System Summit, which is still planned for next year, to put forward what we've learned out of COVID-19 for food system, to support food systems which are local, which support family farming, which support pastoralists, and obviously rely on secure land rights for farmers and for pastoralists and for local land users. And I think for each of you working in your own countries, these are the opportunities, not just as you've already been showing, to show your governments the strength and the power of your organizations in bringing relief at the local level, but also as we emerge from COVID in the coming year, we hope, what different ways of producing food, different ways of recognizing the role of pastoralists in society, the different ways of respecting indigenous peoples can be part of building more resilient societies, more sustainable ways of living, of working, and of being. So let's take this opportunity together as we look ahead to take not just small steps, but I hope big leaps towards what we in ILC call people-centered land governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Very important. You mentioned that is a moment for us to even more have a better vibrancy of the land rights as a core, and also to even more working to show the alternative that we have been working with on an alternative of food systems. So this current food system is not the right way. We need to push the direction where we have been working for quite some time. Thank you very much to all of you. Now, question and answers. I saw in the chat room already more than 70 questions, so meaning it's not possible to answer one by one. And some of them are also input, which is very enriching this discussion. We will copy all of this and put it into our summary later on. But I would like to just take some of the questions in front of me now. First, I think it's from Annalisa. I think this question can go to Dewi. Dewi may also respond this, yeah? Have government in Asia taken special measures to protect indigenous peoples, just to make it shorter? And number two, a question from Saswati Roy. I think this question can go to Jonathan. The question is, problem at the grassroots are twofold. Large number of migrant laborers have come back, and there is no work for many. And secondly, whatever food grown earlier were sold to markets, and now there is no access to market. And the question is how to establish the rural economy. That is from Saswati Roy. Another thing which I think also good to be addressed by Dewi in the time of COVID, we have analysis mentions that in Nepal, land redistribution even bigger in the last 3 months. Is it happening in the other countries in Asia? So land reform even have a better future in Nepal in the last 4 months. We need to understand whether they have we have experience in the other countries, like maybe it can be responded by the participant, and Dewi, especially in Indonesia, maybe you can address about this. That is some of the questions. Maybe you may respond to me, to us now.
Yeah.
Dewi,
Okay.
you can.
Yeah. From our experience in Indonesia, for us is sometimes the decisions from the government is unclear. So it's make us in the ground is really confused about how to coping with the pandemic. So even though politically, like president during the last 3 months is always saying that he encouraged the support from the peasant, he encouraged the support from the fisheries community to support the food crisis. But in reality, in the ground, we noted that during the pandemic, there are so many even land conflict situations still happen. This April, we lost 2 peasants members in South Sumatra, die because the conflict with the company, and many peasants members and indigenous community being criminalized during the COVID-19. So it's like a paradox from the government, helping the farmers, asking the help from the farmers, the fisheries from indigenous, but in the same time, the company, palm oil plantations, mining concessions still operate, and it's making the situations even worse. Maybe they're using the lockdown policy, so the peasants and indigenous cannot do more in trying to fight against the land grabbings or the criminalization. So I think that's both. We try to mobilize solidarity to urban areas, but in the same time, we're still facing the challenge in the time during the COVID-19 on land rights.
Thank you, Dewi. Another to Jonathan. Can you respond the questions regarding to market access to market, please?
Right. Thank you, Saswati. I'm not sure from which country are you talking?
India.
India. Okay. Right. So yeah. So I think the good news, well, not really good news, but I think at the moment, if you want to raise the issue of food and land, I think this is the best time to use stories from the ground and bring up to challenge what national governments and also probably global colleagues have been quite positive at this point of time. I mean, given the statistics, the formal ones, we cannot actually tell what happens unless everybody collect the evidence from the ground and then share it. And so I would like to share you based on my research on Indonesia. One is I just spoke to another webinar before. This is the second one today. We talk about UBI, the Universal Basic Income. And as you know, UBI has been seen by the left as kind of a bad kind of gesture, but the right camps also say that it's bad. Well, I think the debate has been over 30 years. And I think if you look at the evidence, we come to the conclusion that that is probably the best that you could actually promote. At this point of time, the migrants, laborers from Indonesia also return home. It's like more than 50,000 now, without incomes. You know, how you support them? Indonesia, at the moment, they have a few programs at their disposal, and you can actually call them as cash transfer programming. But the way the cash transfer programming is actually calculated is quite short. Like the Ministry of Social Welfare provide one-off transfer for a number of 10 to 15 million people. But these people have been actually predefined, pre-selected already because they're on the database. The returners, I mean the migrant laborers that return from Malaysia, they don't have anything apart from the other alternatives. So some of the ministers have their own cash transfer programming at their disposal. The problem with this model is it's too slow because they have to create long procedures of creating a list on criteria and then targeting the groups. I think at this point of time, the best way is you create UBI. For Indonesia, it's possible because the money has been there. Since 2015, the country have been allocating almost like 100,000 US dollar. Well, probably 80 to 90,000 US dollar a year for every village, regardless of the size. There are two categories. One is the big size, so it's 1.2 billion in Indonesian rupiah. And if it is not that big, the calculation is between 800 million to 1.2 billion. So somewhere in the between. So it's like roughly 80,000 US dollar. The money is there. Most of the money is spent on physical infrastructure, and most of them are kind of broken after a year because poorly built, and most of the money went to local private firms because the villagers hired, instruments, tools, like excavators from the rich in the town. So what we suggest is actually government turn the program into UBI at this point of time because the money is there, and then you don't have to think much about taking the loan from abroad. We wrote this in conversation like a month ago. 2 weeks ago. So for the last 2 days, we have been trying to explain what is UBI, because this is a long reflection on how can we create a more justice society in the future. In the future, where all the farmers will be replaced by automation, I think Michael talked about the future, and you have to change the way you do the business as usual. So imagine if this in Europe, that farmers will be replaced, or labor will be replaced by automation and robots. What they're going to do to make a living. So one way to do is probably you have to create a basic income for them. How you calculate it, it is very based on context. Now, yesterday we also talked about the same thing, and some of us talk about the experience of civil society in Brazil, where they were able to organize themselves to come up with a big push to the government to create a law on UBI. So it's not a question that developing countries cannot do that. It's a matter of how you organize yourself and push the government to do that. Now, some people concerned about if we go for UBI, that will disincentivize farmers to grow. I think that is a claim that we need to see. Of course, we have to be careful, but I don't believe that claim because I think farmers are rational. They want to also build their diversity of livelihoods. So if there is extra income, that will be very good. The experiment has been carried out also in some of the colleagues from climate movement. You know, they try to build the carbon dividend. So we provide the local communities who have been the guardians of the planet by ensuring management of land and forest in a better way. and they get basic income because of that activities. And you can compensate with the carbon kind of trade mechanism. Not really necessarily that, but it's kind of carbon dividend, what they call in some of the places that are being experimented at this point of time. So I think I hope I can answer that questions, because I think UBI or unconditional cash transfer can be also used. Let me finish with one thing. International humanitarian NGOs for a very long time reject the idea of cash transfer program. So in 2016, there was a global movement. It's the World Humanitarian Summit that proposed a global humanitarian reform. And what the first agenda for the reform is to promote for cash transfer program in disaster event. Nowadays, big players like World Vision, Save the Children, Oxfam, and so on, they changed their mind. If you look at 10 years ago, they were actually the opposite to this kind of idea. Like World Vision, they now committed like 50% of their portfolio is now turning into cash. And that really helps, because I've seen that also happen in Palu. I went to Central Sulawesi like last year, and some of the farmers use the money to buy land. That is something that to me is quite interesting. Anyway, I will stop there and thank you for the questions.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. I still have tens of inputs now in the chat room, but it seems I cannot respond everything. One important part is for Dharm, I think. I think this will be for Mike. If you can respond this, Mike. The question of Dharm is Dharm is the challenge now we assumes to be intensified in the days to come in the role of CSO to protect land rights and to engage themselves with the communities. And the question is how the CSO and ILC, like ILC members, can engage rationally to address the need of the moment. Actually, you mentioned already the things to do already, but if you want to more focus on to address Dharm, Mike. Mike, please.
That's okay.
Okay. I think thank you also everyone for the inputs. We have the time is over, but we can have more 7 minutes. I think I can give this waiver into 5 minutes, 7 minutes. So guys, if you want to interact directly with the speakers, you can raise your hand. I will pick 2 participants that want to talk in 1 minute. Okay, one is Vidya, because Vidya is in front of me now. I don't know the other. Any other that want to raise hand? Of course, you need to show your video. I need to see. Okay, I don't see the other, but I think I have Vidya from India. Vidya, do you have another one before I give floor to Vidya? Chance to Vidya. Okay, now Vidya, please very short and because time is very.
I heard Mike and it is very important. But my question I raised on the chat also about the most of our regimes have become authoritarian today. Like even in our this internet and everything is being spied. But there have been certain laws that have been changed in our country. Very in terms of they are not discussed in assemblies, but they are brought through the amendment by the governors things. One is the labor law. On labor law, they have said that they have allowed the companies to dismiss the laborers at any time and raise their working hour from 9 to 12 hours. So can you imagine at this crisis, the workers are forced to do 12 hours of work without getting any extra money for that, and can be dismissed at any way. So I think there are many other human rights issues which are coming up. And I agree with the point that we have to raise the issue, because most of the migrants will go back home, and the issue of land and land reform become very, very important. So how do we handle these issues as a collective in the ILC? Because in other countries also these issues might be coming up.
You want to respond, Mike?
Yeah.
Please, Mike.
Well, I think it's just to note what you're saying, VB, that the reason that we come together in a coalition is that there are some common challenges we face across our countries that we need to work on together. So all I can say is, and I think you gave us one example, VB, of basically human rights abuses. There are many other examples of human rights abuses that other members are telling us of. And so part of what we're doing is we're trying to measure them as ILC. So just to give you one example, you know that we have the Landex, which is the global measuring tool for different aspects of land rights. And one of the things we're measuring on Landex is we're collecting information on is human rights abuses related to COVID-19. And I would say if any of you are aware of particular examples, please contact our team, Saurlin or the team here. We want to get that information, that data publicly available. It's not easy to get that data, but I think with the network that we have here, we have access to a lot of parts of the world where this is happening and the world needs to know. Just to assure you that as we go through the different phases of this crisis, and hopefully the different phases of coming out of the crisis, we take very seriously our role as ILC in finding what are the common challenges of members, and how we as a network that belongs to you, to your organizations, can be part of helping you through those solutions. So please, we're having webinars like this in all regions, so we're trying to get a global picture, but please also don't hesitate just to share your experiences directly with us outside of the webinars as well, and we'll do what we can to build that into our work plan as ILC.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We still have a lot of inputs now in the chat room. We consider to answer this through written format, so we are not going to address things here now. But one important part, I think I read here is very important on how to local government, how the ILC groups can also collaborate with local government, not only national government, because it's very important. It's from Samuel Purba. I think it's very important part. I think I agree with you. And one more from you before we close this conversation, and then we give to the panelists for closing. Okay, Moni from Bangladesh, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't have a specific questions, but I have some observations. One is, as Mike has been talking about the local government, so it is not same everywhere. So in our country, from the last time, what happened with the local government, these are the people nominated by the political party. So they act as the representative of political parties, so that they act what the party says, not the people. So that is the problem now we are facing with. Earlier we have been focusing on this. And another missing issue is, so most of the government, as listening to Devi and others, trying to manage this one as crisis. And so they are dealing with the crisis like how to ensure food supply and embracing the people. But many things in between. In Bangladesh, as I wrote, the harvesting is a problem for last few years. So getting the paddy workers, so for the harvesting, it is not there. But the government immediately come up with this one as an impact of COVID, but which is not the case. So they are leaving agriculture, they are leaving the profession of doing farming. These are the things these are not yet in the discussion. So we need to look into how to bring back all this into discussion. So how they are managing, seeing all this from the perspective of food supply, food security, not from the perspective of rights, land rights, and how to do the agriculture in a very different way where people are comfortable. So this need to be, I think, talked about, and we need to develop, I don't know what strategy or whatever, how to address those and keep upholding all this. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you, Moni. Roswan from Bangladesh, and I think it's feedback for us, no questions. So now it's 15:20. I think we pass a bit longer. I think now I need to give one final remarks from panelists, from each panelist. Yeah, 1 minute, please, from each panelist to have a final remarks. I give Dewi first. 1 minute, please, final remarks.
Yeah, I think despite all the challenge and also the multi-crisis that we're facing during the COVID-19, I think the most important lessons for all of us is how to go beyond COVID-19, because we can see that people can do a lot of things, can mobilize many solidarity, like peasants groups, indigenous groups, fisher folk groups, and even worker union go together with the peasants on how to coping with the situation. So I think we need like to think the visions of the development in the futures. I agree that we cannot go again based on business as usual, but we need like to have transformative actions among the movement. And we know we have a lot of intensive discussions with labor unions, with fisher folk, on how to break the long chains of the capitalism. So I think this will be a good opportunity for us after the COVID-19. And also land rights, food sovereignty become the huge issues now in Indonesia. So I think this is a good momentum for land rights movement, for IPs, for Agrarian Reform movement to still asking the government to really implement agrarian reform so that we cannot suffer from this some kind of food crisis anymore. That's, I think, from my side.
Thank you, Dewi. Jonathan Lassa, you have 1 minute, please. Final remarks.
Right. One of the global agenda at the moment is promoted by UNDRR, United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, concerning build back better. So how you build back better after disaster, how you build back better after recovery. But based on my research, and also based on research from Ilan Noe in New Zealand, there is no such things as build back better, because governments do not have agenda for strategic recovery. So if you look at the impact of livestock on El Nino on livestock on Indonesia, especially like from my place in West Timor, after 20 years, it's not recovered. It's not going back to the trend. It simply went back 20 years after to the stage in 1998. And if you look at the data on recovery from elsewhere in the world, including tourism and others, there is no going back to the past strife of some of the sectors. So if you guys need to, I think you need, land-based strikes need to think about disaster seriously, and how you recover the sector in a more strategic way, because disasters open up new opportunities not only for us, but also for the capitalists to create new dynamics on land ownership after disaster. And we have seen that a lot. And this big disaster will also create the same thing. Just that, and all the best. Thank you for having me. Sorry.
Thank you, Jonathan. Raja, 1 minute, please. Final remarks.
Hey, yes, thank you. So from me, I think from me, I take also what Dewi has told us about, like, and also Jonathan, like, what is after COVID-19? I mean, there will, some people talk about the new normals, etc., etc., etc. There are a lot of new normals. Probably there will be some new normals. Yes, but then for me again, I would like to raise our awareness of the data sovereignty and the questions of technology, the questions of the political questions of technology. So technology is not only rendering technicalities, not only about techniques, but I would suggest us all to think really deeper and deeper and further on the rendering political of technology, because data is politics, technology is politics as well. If it's not in our hand, also in the case of in the context of our struggles against land grabbing, against for agrarian reform, I think again we should ask ourselves, like, who produced the data and how can we produce the data? How can we use technology politically more, even like give more power to ourselves, give more, you know, in the technology itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Irendra. Now, final remarks from Mike, please. 1 minute.
I think all of you have said it so well in what you've said in the chat and what you've said through the video. So I'm not going to repeat it, but just to firstly congratulate all of you for the really inspiring work that you're doing in this difficult time. It's fantastic to see what so many of your the very important role that so many of your organizations are playing in meeting urgent and critical needs on the ground right now. It's also very, very inspiring to hear about how you're already thinking about, in the words of Jonathan, building back better. How as we emerge from the crisis, we can be part of bringing about a better way of feeding ourselves, a better way of looking after our planet, a better way of providing economic opportunity and building more equal societies. So I think as we are all engaged in different contexts and different circumstances, you know, the final message from us is just a message of solidarity. And of support as ILC, that we're together in this very, very critical time in our work, a time of crisis, but also a time of opportunity as we look ahead. And we're very privileged to be working with so many incredible organizations and incredible people in incredible organizations in Asia and in also other regions across the world. So we wish you the best. We're with you, and keep strong, keep safe in this time of great challenge and difficulty, but also great opportunity. Over.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I think I don't need to repeat again to wrap up this process. I think we will send you the summary after this. Thank you very much. Really appreciate especially in the chat rooms. There's a very rich discussions. We will pick some of the topics there to be discussed in the future. So that will be, we will propose the next topic from the process of discussions in the chat room. So don't worry, all your comments and feedbacks there will be also consolidated in our table. So yeah, this is personally, this really very nice to see you everyone. And I think we should do the same in the future, in the next coming days and months for the next meeting. Yeah. And also thank you very much for all the panelists. And yeah, we will send you email in this after this. We need your feedbacks to these discussions. And also, it's only 2 minutes. You will see your emails. You will get the survey, 2-minute survey that you can fill. You can also see in the chat room. Andita sent the link that you can send in 2 minutes. And another thing that I can announce is that there are many other interesting webinars organized by ILC. You can go to the learning there. So you just go there, you can see all the topics there, then you can join and you can apply to be participants of the discussions. So thank you very much, everyone. Please show me your video and just wave your hands to say that you're still there. Can you show your video before you're leaving? Thank you very much. And you activate also the mute, so everyone can make a noise.
Ciao.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Healthy.
Thank you all. Bye.
Stay safe. Yeah, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very